Chapter 18. "Excuse me!" Angelica shouted from the edge of the road. She had spotted a breakage in the fence around 30 feet from the gates at the front of the property, but Angelica didn't want to startle the man who had a golf club and a handful of golf balls at his disposal, and she had no idea what else he might have to hand. He ignored her and began to hit the balls again. Angelica was sure he had heard her, so she took the unprecedented step of climbing noisily through the gap in the fence. The noise was part of the same plan, to do whatever she could to avoid startling him. As she struggled through and landed on the ground on the other side with a bump, Angelica was aware that the daylight had disappeared from over her head. Being sure she wasn't in the shade, there was only one explanation for it. As she looked up, that suspicion was confirmed. Vicente Natchez stood over her. She looked closer, watching his hands to see if he made a sudden move. But he did, but it wasn't to harm her. Vicente Natchez held out his hand to help her up from the ground. The skin-coloured underwear was still unnerving, but she told herself that he was wearing something and that seemed to calm her nervousness. "My name is Vicente Natchez. How can I help you, my dear?" he asked. She grabbed his hand and got to her feet with his help. When she arose, she let go of his hand and used it with the other one to brush off the terracotta soil that covered her clothes down one side, where she had landed. He stepped back to give her the space to deal with the dust. "My name is Angelica Boyle. I wanted to ask you some questions about your daughter, if that's okay," she asked. "I have no daughter." "I know, and I'm so sorry for your loss." "She was already dead to me." "Oh, I know I've intruded on your grief. Please don't let me upset you any more than you already are," Angelica explained, by now starting to feel guilty for turning up there. Her natural curiosity had got the better of her, stopping her logical brain from functioning as it normally would. "My grief is old. She cut me out of her life months ago. I had already cut her out of mine. Once she walked away from here, from the family home, there was never any way back for her. That was the day her fate was sealed. That was the day I no longer cared for what happened to her." "Senor Natchez, I know you don't mean that. Who are you to come here and tell me what I feel?" His anger was mixed with the sadness that Angelica immediately recognised. His sadness was at losing a daughter twice. He clearly held out hope that they could be reconciled at some stage in the future. After all, they were both still young. This hope hadn't just been extinguished. It had been destroyed, trampled on, burned to the ground, and the ashes dispersed to the four corners of the earth. His heart was broken, and it would be for the rest of his life. "I want to help, I really do," she replied, holding up her palms to the air in a non-threatening manner, in the same way she'd seen people use before. It seemed to work. The man dropped his shoulders, the tension releasing from his body. Angelica knew instinctively that this man hadn't killed his daughter. She also knew he would be prime suspect. His feud with the daughter wouldn't be a secret kept solely between the two of them. If he was this willing to share the information with her, a total stranger, then who knows who else he had told. And it wasn't what you instinctively knew that mattered in a criminal investigation. It was what you could prove. "Have the police been to speak to you?" Angelica asked. "They came last night to inform me of her passing. I told them to get lost." "You told them what?" "I told the police that I had no care at all for the welfare of that woman. They said they would be back again today." "May I make a suggestion?" Angelica inquired. "You may," he responded with a smile that told 1,000 stories. The one she was reading was the one that said, "Why are you lecturing me?" Angelica didn't let that put her off. She continued, "I suggest that you change your language when they do return. They could put last night down to grief. But if you continue to speak like you didn't care if Georgina was dead or alive, then you become a suspect. That and the distance between you will make you someone the police will wish to pursue for her death. I'm sure you don't want that." "I'm sure," he replied, nodding towards the gap in the fence. Angelica took that as her cue to leave. She left a little more elegantly than she had arrived. Before long, she was back in her car, driving away from the Natchez home with a feeling that Vicente's mouth could get him in a whole lot of trouble that he probably didn't deserve.